Only when I'm where I'm supposed to be. Well, thank you all for having me here today. And yes, Dave, I do see lots of faces of people who have been active on the Scenic Byway Committee through the years. And maybe there's a few of you who want to step up at this point and help augment our roles. Because we're always looking for interested people. But today I want to explain what the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway is, kind of in the technical terms, and also what the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway Committee has done through the years because of that designation. So what is the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway? We drive it almost every day. We see the logo painted on the water tower when we leave town. We sometimes call it the trail or the Gunflint. We know it as the road to our favorite places and to our homes. Technically, in National Scenic Byway jargon, the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway is a 57-mile long, 2-mile wide corridor with Cook County 12 in the middle of it. The MnDOT website defines a scenic byway as a road corridor that has regionally outstanding scenic, natural, recreational, cultural, historic, or archaeological significance. So it's not just because it's scenic. It could be road to a mine, but it was historically important in that area. Usually it doesn't work out that way, but it could happen. These corridors offer an alternative travel route to our major highways and daily travel patterns, while telling the story about Minnesota's heritage, recreational activities, or its beauty. The Minnesota Scenic Byway Program is administered by MnDOT, the Minnesota DNR, the Minnesota Historical Society, and Explore Minnesota. It's chaired by a representative of the Department of Transportation. Minnesota has 22 scenic byways. Minnesota is an active state. We all, everybody wants to proclaim that their place is great and we need to know about it. Minnesota also has 11 national scenic byways. To become a national scenic byway, you must already be a state scenic byway and go through an extensive application process outlining one of the previously mentioned intrinsic qualities. Minnesota also has 2 All-American roads out of about 11 in the US, the North Shore Scenic Drive and the Great River Road, which runs through many states. The Gunflint Trail outlined our natural beauty as our intrinsic quality with a real heavy lean on the history of the area in our application. The Scenic Byway Committee is organized as a committee of the Gunflint Trail Association, the group of lodges and outfitters on the Gunflint Trail. So we're just a committee with members of the GTA, residents, our county commissioner, and representatives of the U.S. Forest Service, the Cook County Highway Department, and Visit Cook County. Most scenic byway committees are marketing organizations, representing multiple towns and cities and various roads. Surprise, the Gunflint Trail in this instance, too, is not like all the others. We're one road, no cities, no paid staff, we're all volunteer, much like this organization. Anything that has passion will usually get done. It isn't always that you need the money behind it. Our mission statement reads, the mission of the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway Committee is to act as advocates and stewards for the preservation, protection, understanding, and maintenance of the natural and historic intrinsic qualities of the Gunflint Trail and its corridor. The goal of the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway Committee is to work with all stakeholders to understand and retain those intrinsic qualities for all those who work, live, recreate, and value the area. Essentially, we try to preserve what we have all come up here to enjoy, just like this organization. And we do this by nudging. We nudge because we don't have a checkbook. Any project we take on is with the support of other organizations or the county, and they act as fiscal agents when necessary. We kind of like it that way. We aren't in charge of anything. The county highway department is in charge of the road, what needs fixing, plowing, mowing, signage, all those things they decide, but we try to nudge them in certain directions. The United States Forest Service is in charge of its lands. What gets logged, how it gets logged, what gets planted, what gets burned, what doesn't. Sometimes things burn without anybody thinking it should get burned. But they get to decide what happens on their lands. We try to nudge them in certain directions. So, why apply to be a scenic byway if there is no decision-making authority and no money? Well, having the designation has helped us point out the necessity of preserving our history of the natural area when powers that be try to put it in jeopardy. But to begin with, there was a small amount of seed money in the program, and there have always been grant possibilities on state and federal levels. So the GTA created the application for state byway designation. And in early July 1999, the Gunflint Trail became a Minnesota Scenic Byway. And then the July 4th storm came along. So our enthusiasm was very short-lived. And we all kind of went back to our corners and tried to put our lives together. And the Scenic Byway designation, it's like, this will never be scenic again. But lo and behold, by the time we regrouped a few years later, all the GIME funding had dried up. So we wanted to find some ways to have a couple small, non-controversial, cheap projects that the community could get behind us on and could see that we could do something. We took a field trip with the U.S. Forest Service personnel to see what we could do. We landed on having picnic tables and latrines at Swamper Lake, Birch Lake, Little Iron Lake, and the Magnetic Rock Trail. These all had parking already, so that made them a low budget option. The Forest Service donated used picnic tables, continued to keep them a cheap option, and we had volunteers dig latrines. Turned out the Little Iron site is on DNR land, and the trail would need to be insured for liability. Oh my goodness, what do we do? The county helped us with that. And every 10 years, they check in with me again to make sure that it's still a trail and they still need to keep it on their insurance rolls. On that same field trip, Sue Prom, she was a member of the committee at the time, urged us to stop at Chik-Wauk and imagine the possibility for this property now that it was in Forest Service ownership. It was quickly realized that this was more than a project for our committee, and it was an entity unto itself. I think we all know what happened after that. We continued on our path, and more energies went into Chik-Wauk and the Historical Society. One small little thing that happened, Chuck Schmidt at the time was a county engineer, and he occasionally attended our meetings. He heard we were concerned about the mid-trail area and the neighbors walking along the Gunflint Trail. Paving project came up, and he just added 3 feet of pavement on that middle section. We didn't actually, lobby for it or anything. He just kind of heard about us talking, and he did it. Sometimes things happen that way. In 2005, we created our first quarter management plan. And we put it on a CD. It was pretty high tech at that time. Sue Weber was instrumental at that time. I point her out because she's here. If there's people watching who I don't mention by name, you know who you are. And so what is a quarter management plan? Well, It's the first step in applying to be a National Scenic Byway, but it can also, when printed out, it's gonna look something like this. And it's gonna lay out a lot of information. Again, remember that some scenic byways go through multiple cities, multiple road engineers, etc. So it spells all that out. Very short part of our plan that Cook County Highway Department is in charge of our road. There's a local population of X amount, that type of thing is in here, but also what do we imagine possibly doing that supports our mission statement? So one little piece here, a paragraph of recommended enhancements that we put in one of our first plans. Short-term enhancements may include signs recognizing the Ham Lake fire, planting pine in the Ham Lake fire area, and recovering the abandoned wildflower sanctuary, partnering with the Gunflint Trail Historical Society's Chik-Wauk Museum and Nature Center. So after a while, you kind of do all the things in your plan and you make another one, but that's essentially what a plan briefly will do in the Scenic Byway frame of it all. Around 2006, the Grand Marais Water Tower was being repainted, and we were awarded a $6,000 Explore Minnesota grant to help Grand Marais get our logo painted on it.
Yay.
There was a lot of back and forth with that. You wouldn't think that was controversial, but of course it was with some people, but it happened. And then we had a little fire, the Ham Lake fire in 2007. At that time, the trail was closed for a while, and when it reopened, we had an impromptu tree planting. This was mentioned in a Star Tribune article, and we had people driving up from the Twin Cities to help us plant trees that day. It was an incredible feeling to see how many people loved the trail, and we realized that perhaps for the next spring, in 2008, we could do another tree planting with a little more planning, and it would do a lot to create a sense of healing for all of us affected by the fire. And the Gunflint Green-Up was imagined. So, that whole winter, it was an overwhelming job. The main committee consisted of Sue Weber, Bruce Kerfoot, Dave Tuttle, Fred Smith, Jim Johnson, and me. We worked on, and so many other people did too, planning it all and making it all work for everybody. Sue and I and Fred worked closely with Myra Timer and Travis Jones of the Forest Service to create the planting plan. Numerous grants and donations were received, and 75,000 trees were planted by 500 volunteers. Anybody here part of the Gunflint Green-Up that first year? Yeah. And I'm sure that you've gone to visit your trees once in a while. You can see them from the road now, so it's pretty cool. Probably more than any other Scenic Byway project, this illustrated how the Gunflint Trail community is so much bigger than those who have an address up here. Later that year, Sue and I went to Milwaukee to receive the Forest Service Award for Connecting Citizens to the Land. It was pretty cool to get kind of an industry award given to lay people and volunteers. So at the same time that we were working on the the Green-Up, Jim Rammel wrote the fire recovery grant application and was awarded about $200,000. This was administered by the Forest Service in the Upper Trail area affected by the Ham Lake fire. Also at that time, we were really busy at that time, Jim wrote our vegetation management plan. At this point, it has become really our Bible when working with organizations and talking about why we are making the statements that we do, why we think you shouldn't cut down on the trees over here, and why you should maybe worry about fire mitigation over here, that type of thing. So mostly there's a lot of information about historically what trees were growing where, because we've kind of cut everything here. It's not pristine. And so the vegetation management plan helps us nudge things back to the historic vegetation and therefore wildlife of the area. In 2009, with committee guidance, Sue Weber compiled and wrote the National Scenic Byway designation application. It's only this big, so I don't know if you can see, but it went on forever. You can talk to Sue about that. Again, we focused on our natural intrinsic quality. So the trees, the animals, keeping it, native, I guess you might say. When the designation was awarded, I took a trip to Washington, D.C. to represent the byway, and there's proof that we're a National Scenic Byway in this little program. After that, when you're a National Scenic Byway, you become eligible for more federal monies and the Federal Highway Program. And Chik-Wauk was the beneficiary of that. Bruce wrote the grant. We aren't entirely sure the exact amount that it was. Again, it's a paper trail. It's not in our computers anymore. But I want to say it was $250,000. It was a large number. And that ended up going to Split Rock and to create some of the displays. Not long after that, Sue wrote another grant for around $50,000 for the Nature Center program at Chik-Wauk. So we're very intertwined, even if you didn't know all that. In 2012, David Betts was the county engineer at the time, and he was planning a much-needed pavement project in the Loon Lake, Gunflint Lake area. He also intended to create a turn lane at South Gunflint Road and other widening, biggering projects. And in doing some of those realignments, you have to do a lot of paperwork and reports, etc. The highway department does, not us. And so one of it is to take a historical inventory of the area. He had other projects in his head, and so he decided to do the entire Gunflint Trail instead of just that narrow portion, and contracted and had the history, inventory, and evaluation of the Gunflint Trail created. It was like a consultant who created that. And which is how those things get made. And it then was also worked on with SHPO. SHPO, with all of the Gunflint Trail looked at as a whole, SHPO determined that the Gunflint Trail was eligible for National Register of Historic Places, which meant that his proposed turn lane and biggering of the Gunflint Trail roadbed and other changes, big changes, were nixed. And the Gunflint Trail kind of has those protections now, even though nobody's gone through the application process to be a National Historic Place. So Betts left soon after that, and Kristen Foster became the Cook County Highway Engineer. She was great to work with, but she moved on to the MnDOT office in Duluth before long. So I tried to kind of make some threads work here, but meanwhile, back to the vegetation theme. While the Ham Lake fire recovery was happening, all the outside equipment that came in kind of flooded the Gunflint Trail with non-native invasive seeds. If you think about what the roadsides looked like before the fire and what the upper trail looks like after the fire, it's different, very different. And think about driving, I'd say from maybe Clearwater Road or Bearskin Road, down until you get to the new pavement close to Northern Lights. That's what the more native roadside vegetation looks like. And as a whole, the Scenic Byway Committee thought that if the trail is known for its natural qualities, it was prudent to try to preserve the native vegetation. And so we started working on more invasive species and trying to keep what's unique about the Gunflint Trail here and not turn it into, or let it turn into every road everywhere. It's not just the red, white, and jack pine of the forest that make the trail unique, it's the little things too. Fireweed, pearly everlasting, evening primrose, dogbane, wild roses, bunchberries, strawberries, all those little guys. They don't need a lot of mowing, whereas if you have the non-native invasives like bird's foot trefoil, lupins, spotted knapweed, tansy, thistle, reed, canary grass, alfalfa. What's alfalfa doing up here? Sweet white clover, they are all replacing what historically belongs here. So in 2010, the Cook County Invasives Team was created to bring land stewardship agencies together to collaborate on treatment plans. So the DNR owns this land and they're gonna do something, but the Forest Service owns this land and they aren't treating, well, this is just gonna infect the other one. It's just back and forth. So trying to get them all in the same room. Jim Rammel was really instrumental in this, and he pushed for and got this created. It has had its fits and starts, absolutely, with funding and personnel challenges in the past, but it is functioning really well right now under the Ag Inspector at the Cook County Highway Department. I just saw a Facebook post, and Tia Parks is the Ag Inspector, and she's going into the schools and getting the kids all aware of things, and we know that's kind of where the change starts to happen, so I'm excited about that. But there's not nearly enough funding to do what needs doing. In 2014, Jim Rammel also wrote the grant application for the Gunflint Trail Invasive Plant Species Mitigation Project, which was then awarded. This covered the 4 miles from the Magnetic Rock Trail to this turnoff here, essentially, and trying to kill off the non-natives and to reintroduce native plugs and things that we expect to see around here. It was a 4-year project, and it happened, it had success, but without more help continue on the buffers, everything's starting to creep back a little bit. We also revisited our quarter management plan in 2014, and also this one is from 2019. And at that in 2014, we did a survey to find out if we were still in touch with what the residents and visitors wanted on the Gunflint Trail. The survey's #1 takeaway was that the Gunflint Trail should remain the same. So, and we all know to stay the same takes a lot of work. But that felt affirming, and we have continued to focus on our mission to preserve and protect the historic natural values of the Gunflint Trail. There have also been many Forest Service project proposals to review and comment on. This is a layperson's answer to what is a project. It's basically a plan that the Forest Service creates on how to manage a portion of the Spear National Forest. Sometimes its goal is to increase moose habitat or lynx habitat. Sometimes it's to reduce fuels or other reasons too. The methods to achieve these goals are usually logging or fire. The Scenic Byway Committee has always shared our comments with the Forest Service regarding the lands within 1 mile of the Gunflint Trail on either side. The the plans go way beyond that, but we've kept our comments in this area. And they pretty much come out with a new plan every 5 years, or working on a plan. And after the 2008 Ham Lake fire, there was a lull because such a large portion of the Gunflint Trail landscape was set back to year 0. And if they were gonna be logging, they'd be setting that back. So we kind of got a reprieve. But through the years, the Forest Service projects we've commented on have been Devil Trout, Lima Green, Shoko Shoe, Kimball, Devil Trout again, and Twin Green most recently. Everything's named kind of by the breadth of the one lake on one end of the plan and one lake on the other. So Devil Trout would be Devil's Track and Trout Lake, etc. So they just keep working on different areas. As a rule, the Forest Service team would join us at one of our meetings to overview what they are thinking. Often we'll have maps like this. This is from the Kimball project. And this is the area that they were looking at. And of course, all the colors mean different things. But this is how they would start to talk to us. And this is available to the public at the same time. And this is what we're thinking of doing, and this is why, etc. So just, I don't know, if that is of interest. But then we would go back and forth a little bit early on before they went public. They'd maybe take some of the worst things, or what we considered the worst things, out, and then make a proposal that was in the public domain for a public scoping project where everybody writes down what they think they should or shouldn't do, and then they tweak things a little bit and they come out and say, this is what we're doing. You can appeal things, but that becomes a lawsuit, and who has money to go that direction. Why would we, our comments, are often in regards to the Gunflint Trail natural look as our visitors and our residents are driving the Gunflint Trail. It might be you're going completely against what we thought in our vegetation management plan was a good idea for planting pine. Perhaps they're going to cut an area and let it just come back naturally. Well, what often comes back naturally is just a aspen plantation. So anyway, that's where our comments are based, and that's where we're trying to nudge them in certain directions. The Forest Service has been a steady partner on almost everything that we have done through the years, as you've heard chronicled. One of the more feel-good things we've done with the team in green has been a couple of the kiosk signs along the trail. The Ham Lake fire sign that is at the Gunflint Lake Overlook. Don't know if you've stopped to see that. And recently, last year at this time, the Swamper Lake kiosk was unveiled with the theme of different lake names, which was determined. It could be a whole book, obviously. It's just incredible, the source, and it was hard to narrow the focus down. Steve Robertson has been the go-to guy on these, and the end product has been great. John Benson with the Forest Service has been our liaison for many years now, and he's recently moved to the Duluth office, so we're waiting to see who we'll be working with next. Robbie Hass is the current highway engineer, and he's great to work with. He's listened to the mid-trail neighborhood and proposed options for dealing with vehicle speed. All things take funding, and that hasn't materialized yet, but he continues to look for it. Something that is finding a way to move forward is the Gunflint Trail, again, in trying to preserve the view sheds of the area, has been very concerned about signs. Seems like signs always go up, but they never come down. and so they just keep multiplying. And they keep getting brighter and more reflective, and anyway, which does not fit in this part of the world. We've been concerned about that, and Robbie has heard this. He and his team have been working on a county-wide sign policy so changes are made consistently. I think Robbie really brings that to the county, is to be consistent with decisions on why things are the way they are. Most of the yellow curve signs were installed years ago when the measurement was pretty much, well, my coffee spilled on that curve, so I think we better put a sign there. But now, of course, surprise, there's a little gizmo that'll measure how much the car is tweaking and what the recommended speed should be on that particular curve. They now purchased that, and last Robbie shared with the committee, it's like, I think there'll be some signs coming down. So I think that that's a good thing, because you'll notice signs more if there's fewer of them. We all kind of block things out. Probably also noticed when the Gunflint Lake, Loon Lake area was repaved, no passing zone signs popped up everywhere. Robbie has done his research, and with the road, with the traffic that the Gunflint Trail has, you can stripe it or you can sign it, but it isn't necessary to do both. So they've been taking those signs down. So there are some things that are required and some things that are optional, and he's finding out what's required and what's needed. We've also raised our voice with other residents along the way. The county board heard our concerns when the Armor radio towers were going up, and we were concerned about their height that needed to be, they would need to be lit if they went over a certain height. It wasn't just us, it was many residents also, but they found a way to put most of them in areas that they could be lower, and we would not need to have blinking lights on our horizons. And let's make sure, okay. We also, I wonder how many of you even remember this one, we told the Planning and Zoning Board that a used car lot was not the best use of a mid-trail property. Anybody remember that? I think you could just call that junkyard that was being proposed. And we also expressed concern with the county board when a DNR property next to Pincushion, like a 40-acre parcel, was, they were gonna trade with a private developer. So that whole hillside that we see as we come up the Gunflint Trail, well, we know what it would look like in the hands of a developer. It's still in the hands of the DNR. Again, there were lots of other voices there too. But we've been invited to the table, and our voices have been heard because we've been consistently following our mission to preserve and protect the natural and historic intrinsic qualities of the Gunflint Trail. And we will continue to nudge people into those directions. So, anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or try to answer them.
Nancy,
Yes.
one question. Thanks for keeping our trail as nice as it is, and not letting
The
it
committee
get
has, yes.
overdeveloped. But I'm wondering what your position is on the work the Forest Service has done down near Oconto, alongside the road.
Oh,
Have we?
We are not very happy. And that was presented to us as hand piling and, like other places where there've been hand piling and burning, which that has its issues too, but it was never, their plan did not say it was gonna be a mechanical treatment the way it was. And we continue to have conversations with them about this to try to help them see why we are so upset. The problem, I would say, with us, them hearing what we're saying and us hearing what they're saying, is the big concern about spruce budworm coming and fires. And some in the fire area of the Forest Service think that that was a success because only 30% are dead. Because if a wildfire came through, 100% would be dead. And again, it's a real instance of they have the power, they can decide what they want. We are devastated. I mean, that's a really great example because it's so visual. It's not 1 mile off the trail, it's not a half a mile, it's just right there in front of everybody. And we have yet to really conclude our discussion. You know, nothing's gonna change what happened, but we wanna make sure it doesn't happen again.
Good.
In that way.
Good.
So.
Yeah, it was sad to see those big, beautiful reds and whites singed along
Right,
the trail.
and
Yeah.
you know, and then they say they're doing it to protect the trees. It's like, well, but you killed the ones you were trying to protect, so, anyway.
Yeah.
We're going around in a
Keep
circle
up
right
the
now.
good work.
Well, thank you. So, anything else?
Anybody online have anything they'd like to, questions or comments?
I've got one.
Sure.
So the area around George Washington Pines, logged, right up to the road. Is there any influence on, could they
Sure.
have left a little?
Well, again, we had extensive conversations about that. And our understanding, they actually thought they did what we were suggesting they do. So what we were suggesting they do, be easier if I had a chalkboard real quick. But if they had the leave islands, if they were bigger and more substantial. Instead of just these wispies for such a long area, if they could have had a bunch of trees in this spot and a bunch of trees there. I actually would sort of agree, when they got into it, there weren't any real trees there. It was all such unattractive balsam, or, you know, that was gonna go. So they didn't have what to work with. Also on field trips that we had done with them, it was a little more rolling hills, and this is very flat, and so it didn't have, the topography didn't help them hide the extent, but we were all shocked. And I will tell you that in the same plan, the other side of the road is supposed to be treated the same, in a similar way. They told us at our last meeting that has been put on hold at this point. That doesn't mean it won't ever happen, but it has been put on hold to not have the public so upset. I will also say about that whole section, it's a prime example of one of the big ways we've tried to nudge groups in the past, in that the Forest Service was so reluctant to have a public meeting about that area. And we just kept saying, you have to have a public meeting. You don't know what's going to hit you if you don't talk about it beforehand. So they did, and they tweaked things a little bit, but it was horrible. And
Are they gonna do anything to plant?
it is planted.
It is,
And actually, if
okay.
you drive it in the winter, I'm amazed at how well everything there has come up. So everything's up.
Hopefully not balsams.
No. Well, I mean, of course, that,
Some.
you know, balsams and, you know, nature doesn't sit still. Nature keeps going, but there's a lot of pine planted in there right
great.
now. So another instance of really trying to get the powers that be have public meetings is like that, the highway department proposal on the Loon Lake, Gunflint Lake area. I just was like, you can't do what you're talking about doing. This was before the SHPO response. You can't do this without telling the public this is what you're doing. And they finally did that, and and they heard they had a lot of comments.
So just to mention, as a historical society, the windy road of the Gunflint Trail where it winds along the Cross River
Oh, yeah.
is the bed of the railroad is underneath there, the Paulson Mine Railroad. And that highway engineer did not know that until after the archaeology study and, you know, the historic designation was noted, so. And I just wanted to add, Nancy, that get on the Forest Service newsletter,
Yeah.
email list, so they send you their logging proposals, they will send those, it's public, you can get that information, and then participate.
Yeah.
Don't rely on the Scenic Byway, I mean, they're doing a lot, but everybody that participates is counted. It's like a lot of other government things. Your voice is, they read them, your voice is heard. Go to the public meetings if they have them. Don't just expect someone else to do it, because they really do count the number of comments they get.
Yeah, and the Byways Committee's comment counts the same as your comment does. So, they might read it a little more thoroughly, they might come to our meeting and respond to it, but as far as tallying and counting, your comment counts the same as our group comment, so. Okay.
Well, thank you very, very, very much. So in conclusion, I'd like everybody to clap their hands in thanksgiving for everybody that's in here, all the work everybody's doing, all the progress we're making, the struggles we get through. It's really a community, so let's do that. As they say in Japan, itadakimasu. Time to eat.
Some of us can't wait.
Biro omain shimasu means I want a beer.